Welcome to Jersey Matters. I'm Larry Menti. Alarming new statistics are out that show New Jersey is one of the worst states in the country for the health of mothers in labor and post-labor. In a moment, we are going to talk to New Jersey Assemblyman Herb Conaway from Burlington County. He's also a physician about what the state should do about this. Also on today's show, a unique way of dealing with the opioid crisis. In Ocean County, they're doing something called a social autopsy. We'll explain what that is. And in New Jersey, they seem to tax everything, but a tax on the rain? We'll explain. But first, our interview with Burlington County Assemblyman Herb Conaway. The maternal death rate, those women that die either during or right after childbirth, is shocking. Out of the 50 states, we have the 45th highest rate, and it is 4 times more likely for an African-American woman to die either during or right after childbirth. And the state is trying to handle that problem. Here to talk about that is a man that has an important voice when it comes to health issues and health legislation coming out of Trenton, Assemblyman Herb Conaway, representing the 7th Legislative District in New Jersey, which is in Burlington County. I should point out that he is also a physician. Thank you so much for being here.
Glad to be with you.
What can be done?
Well, this problem, as many problems have many facets to it, and it needs to be attacked on a broad front. We've just passed on the 23rd of January out of our Health Committee a package of bills to address the problem broadly. One of the important pieces of legislation passed out of my committee on that day was to expand insurance coverage for women on Medicaid. We spend about $700 million in the Medicaid program on childbirth alone. It's a huge part of our budget. It accounts for about 40% of the births in our state. And one of the things we have found is that under current rules, women really don't get enough care in the postpartum period to protect their health, to protect the health of their newborn, and to get information on how to space their pregnancies so that they can have a more successful or a successful pregnancy if they choose to get pregnant again in the future.
Is that all women? Because when you look at the statistics, it seems like that for women that are not of color, that the rate is going down a little bit. It's naggingly high for African-American women.
That's right.
So are they getting post-labor help and the other people are not?
Well, if your health insurance is Medicaid, you're not getting that because your coverage only lasts 60 days after the termination of the pregnancy, after the end of the pregnancy.
So it has to do with affluence.
Well, yes, it does have to do with affluence, but there are other factors: racism, economics, affluence. That impact this access to care, fragmented care that often is what poor people have to deal with in our state. So with the package of bills we're putting forward, we're trying to address all of those issues. The access question is to make sure that people have a full year of coverage after their birth so that they can get back to their obstetrician, find out, get information on how they're doing in the postpartum period beyond just 60 days, because some complications occur after that, and more importantly, get information they need to space their pregnancies, which is birth control. We have very good medications for long-term reversible contraception. A lot of women who could benefit from that don't get it, in part because they don't have enough coverage to come in and have that discussion with the physician, to plan their future in terms of any additional children they may wish to have, and also preventing pregnancies, as they would wish to do, by having the ability to go get a doctor and then get those important medications paid for.
When you said the problem is multifaceted, you leveled a pretty heavy charge in saying that there's racism involved. What kind of racism? Is it institutional racism?
Well, it's partly that, because there are, people of color, people who are far down on the scale socioeconomically, are in a system of care that is different from those who are not in that same position.
But that has to do with wealth, not race, doesn't it?
Well, it does, but wealth and race do go together, because if you look at the statistics, you find that many people who are of color have less income and wealth.
You understand what I'm saying, though? To say it's racism would mean that it has to do with color, when it may just be an offshoot of something else.
Well, unless they're connected, in which they are. Race is connected to wealth. Now, So you mentioned institutional racism, but there's also unconscious bias that women face, that black people in particular face here in this country and across the country, really around the world, that needs to be addressed by the healthcare system. And so there are assumptions made about the kind of care one wants. There are ways, cultural competency, how you speak to people about care, suspicions of the healthcare system which need to be overcome. So there are a lot of things involved in this, because when you look at statistics of women who have wealth and affluence, who happen to be of color, you know, they are, unfortunately, their rate of bad outcomes is similar to those who have less
so it's not just wealth.
So it's not just wealth, but it's partly that.
And so you're saying that there are healthcare professionals who are denying proper care to people because of the color of their skin, and they don't even know why they're doing it. It's an unconscious racism.
Well, I think there are assumptions that often they're involved in interactions between people about the kind of care. I remember when I was a resident, I was, and I don't, well, we were talking about a young man at the time, who happened to be a person of color, I don't remember if he was Hispanic or black, who had, you know, sort of a rare disease. And I remember the attending sort of dismissing that this person wasn't sort of going to care as much about their life as somebody else. And I'll never forget that interaction, and because I challenged him on it, because I thought, you know, everybody cares about their life. And it was surprising to hear this being said by someone who's in charge of somebody's health care, but we know that kind of thing happens. I hope it happens less today than it did, you know, 20 years ago when I was in residency, but we know, and I don't think this person, when I challenged him, even realized what he was saying at the time. But we know that these things happen, and we have to address it through education and training, and hopefully as society just moves forward and recognizes the contributions that everybody in our society can play and should play, and advancing the course of mankind throughout history, that these kinds of things will get better. But we know that they exist, and we know it has an impact. The question is how much impact. We know that access to care has a lot to do with wealth.
And what is fixable? I mean, if it's unconscious bias, sometimes it's not fixable. I want to move on to a couple other topics really quickly, including legalized marijuana. There was an expectation that the bill for legalized marijuana would be passed by now, but there's several people who have not really taken a position on it, including you. They don't have your vote yet for this. Why not?
Well, I'm looking at the issue, and I'm taking the tenor of the people that I represent in my district. I have been concerned for years about the impact of our marijuana laws on youth. If you get pulled over and some marijuana is found in your car, you now get a trafficking charge, or you have you otherwise have possession of marijuana. That can derail your ability to go to college. It gives you a record that stays with you that can interfere with your ability to get a job. And we know that there is. You talk about the disproportionate impact.
So you're pro-recreational marijuana?
No, well, I'm looking at it. I'm pro getting that issue of disparity fixed.
You have an important voice in this because you're a physician.
Yes.
And so that's why people look to you on this issue, because the thought is that recreational marijuana, all the health concerns of the past, you know, we should ignore them. It's not that bad.
Well, I don't think that anyone can say that that is so. There was just a JAMA, which is one of our big important research magazines that's printed out, looked at a review of marijuana and health effects across the spectrum. And what they found is that we mostly don't know all that we should know about marijuana and its use and its impact on human health. We know there are suggestions that they're not enormous or significant adverse effects, but we can't say that with a surety. Where there is a concern about the impact of particularly chronic use on the young developing mind, and that is, you know, up to the age of 22 and in that young adulthood stage, that heavy use is associated now with mental illness. Not absolutely proven, but it is associated with mental illness.
So is that
the reasons to be cautious.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at. You just answered the question before I answered it. So you are leaning towards it. Please, I'm putting words in your mouth. I understand it.
Don't do that.
For the social aspect, and you're concerned about the social aspect and the social justice aspect, but you're holding back because of health concerns.
Well, health concerns, and also to see the bill and the legislation, to see what comes out. I mean, a lot of, you know, we vote on legislation, and the components of that legislation, particularly big pieces of legislation like this, we need to look at very carefully. And so I want to see how I really want to see the bill in its final form.
That's
and
fair.
Then I'll make a decision about
what a novel idea.
What I'll do on it. That's exactly right.
Sir, I really appreciate your time. It's
Glad
always
to
a
be here.
pleasure to talk to you.
Absolutely.
Assemblyman Herb Conaway, representing the 7th Legislative District in Burlington County, New Jersey. When we come back, in Ocean County, they are taking a unique approach to fighting the opioid crisis. They're looking back at a person's life. They're calling it a social autopsy. We'll explain when Jersey Matters continues.